This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
And you have a great idea for an episode today. I love this idea. So this whole thing, it's the Practical Prayer Podcast, and Practical Prayer is in the book Practical Prayer for Real Results. And you said it's you're like a little league coach. You said let's go back and do the basics. Let's get back to the fundamentals here. Okay, we're going to do some throwing and some catching and some batting and some running.
Well, you know what? I always wanted to do this piece, but I'm a bit selfish at times because I can ask you questions that's something I heard or thought about, and then you'll answer it. And I'm thinking, okay, now wait a minute. This is the Practical Prayer Podcast. Is this fair? And actually, I read a comment last week that popped up and said, are we going to go through the practical prayer? And I thought, well, obviously they haven't been with us long, so maybe something each episode should say, yeah, we're going to, no matter what we do, we're going to talk about something. We're going to zero in on it. So anyway, that's me, just kind of slowing things down a little bit.
Okay, well, we can definitely do that. And this is episode number 150, so it's probably a good time to reestablish anyway. And the book Practical Prayer for Real Results has 40 sample prayers in it. Basically, it gives you, there's some front material that says, here's what a practical prayer is, and then there's some sample prayers in a bunch of different categories. And then it goes into a more detailed breakdown at the end.
You got a copy of the book? Let's see what it looks like. Yeah. All right, there you go.
There's a copy of the book for the folks who are watching us on video. And it's also available on Amazon. You can get your own copy, and it's Kindle too. So you get paperback or Kindle version of the book. And a practical prayer it's a formula for doing a prayer. And it's a standardized formula, and it uses 5 steps to do the prayer process. And then there's a couple of other steps we can throw in if it seems like the prayer is probably not going to be as effective as we wanted it to be. A practical prayer is a mechanism of understanding and then changing our beliefs to open to something that's different and better. And the other thing that happens with a practical prayer is if we've been having an experience that we don't like, or if we have something that we want to have in our life that we don't have, then what we need to do is identify the experience that we want to have instead. We can't be looking in the rearview mirror about the road that we didn't like and talk about that, because it's an infinitely creative universe that's going to respond to our creative word. And if all we're talking about is what we used to have that we don't like, then, you please God, don't make me sick. It's like we're just talking about sickness. What do you want instead? You want to be able to get out of bed? Do you want to be able to dance? Is there skydiving? Whatever.
And it sounds easy. Let me say this to anybody where this might be a different approach. I took the first course in 2020, and it was such a different way of thinking about prayer, doing prayer, and all that business. And so I got the ebook, the Kindle version. So because I'm always out and somewhere, and sometimes I gotta get the car and check out something. And so I'm doing it on my phone often before I'm going into events and meetings and what have you. So check out the Kindle version. That shameless plug there, but I'm just saying it worked good for some of us who like Kindle. However, this was a difficult approach to prayer because it wasn't just saying words differently. It took a belief adjustment. I'll say it like that.
It's a huge belief adjustment.
And if you skip over that part, nothing works. Because, like Jesus says, you have it as you believe, it's another podcast in itself. But you really, really do have to have a belief adjustment or readjustment. And so that was important. And I kind of, that was something that, because you don't know what you believe until you confront it and challenge it. And then how does that fit? Well, and then listen, don't tell anybody I said this, anybody. Okay? Don't tell anybody I said this. But I thought, well, that's why my prayers ain't been working. Don't let that get
really
out. If you tell anybody, I'm gonna know where you got it from.
Oh yeah. There's no chance anybody hearing it here. If we do a prayer for something that we don't believe that we deserve, or don't believe that we're going to get, or something we don't believe is possible, what's operative is not the prayer. What's operative is our belief. The prayer is a method of, first of all, creating a new belief, putting a new conscious intention into the creative law that creates everything. And it's also a way of understanding our belief. Because if I get myself into the zone in the middle of the prayer and I claim something that I don't believe I'm going to get, I get my intuition, my little voice in the back of my head will go, no, that's not going to happen. And that's diagnostic. That's the little voice telling us what we believe. And until we change that, we're not going to change our experience.
Yeah. And you know what? Here I go being slow again. But you need to also know that there's a lot of beliefs wrapped up in what seems like one belief. Because as you were explaining that, I was thinking, you said, I don't believe I deserve it. And I'm thinking of things that back then I thought, well, yeah, I think I deserve it for this reason. But then something else comes up that doesn't have to do with deserving. Might be comparing situations that I thought I deserved something before and nothing happened. It's a lot in there to just take your time with. And so the belief part is tremendous, but it's worth the time because, Yeah.
So which prayer did you want to start with? And do you have the paperback or you're still on the Kindle?
I'm a Kindle girl, Okay, so I'm on Kindle. And I picked a couple, but let's start with prayers for financial prosperity.
Okay.
And I thought the subject is interesting. The prayer isn't terribly long. So there we go.
Okay. So which one do you want to do?
The first one, money to spend, share, and save.
Yep. So that is a prayer for money to spend, share, and save.
Okay. So in the beginning, the first part, you talked about God, the universe, and abundant, right? So the first part is about, what I call what you believe about God.
Yep.
And
you want me to read
then,
it so that people have it for reference?
That makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is the prayer. And if you're reading along in the book, this is on page 28. It's money to spend, share, and save. This is an abundant universe. There are billions of stars and billions of galaxies. One glance at the night sky is ample proof that this is an infinitely abundant universe. A forest has billions of leaves on thousands of trees, all living and growing in a connected ecosystem. The economy is another of God's creations, with money as the currency that flows in exchange and balance. All of these uncountable riches are part of one divine creative expression, a dazzling work of art on God's canvas. And that is the first step in the prayer.
So aside from just being beautifully written, and you called it flowery language, that's fine. I think that that part, the way it was written, is very settling and fresh, kind of gives us, if you're coming into it stressed and worried and why I don't have it, just the way it's written. But that's not your point. But I just wanted to throw that in. But what I particularly liked about this was when you got to the middle, the economy is another of God's creations. This is when it becomes really personal. You know, in the beginning, the galaxies and everything is nice and it's beautiful, but the economy is where it hits home. And with money as a currency that flows in exchange and balance, that makes me raise an eyebrow and say, okay, wait a minute, this is God's domain as well. You know, God gets in this because we tend to think that it's separate from God. You know, God is taking care of whatever else, but money belongs to the powers that be and how that works. But this brings it into a different focus. And I just thought that was worth mentioning because that's a belief adjustment right there.
Sure. And it doesn't matter, by the way, what the prayer is going to be for. This one is about prayers for financial prosperity. So this is one of those. If it's about health or if it's about relationships or whatever, creativity, whatever it's going to be about, the first step is always very similar. It is a reminder to ourselves that there is one divine power and presence that is sharing itself as everything. So it's not possible to look at something and say, well, that's not God. You can't look at money and say, well, that's not God, because everything is God.
And that's a point to emphasize, because I tell you sometimes off camera, like, you've been in this forever, this is easy for you. But for some people who are just getting started, and not even just getting started, to really let that sink in. I remember one of the first assignments that we had online, I think it was. Oh my God, we all had to do our practical prayer. And I think we were just the class, and I was terrified. I never told this story before. I was absolutely terrified. And I had my opening line, right? So I figured, listen, just use what other people have used. Don't try to be creative. You're going to be around a while. You can come up with some other stuff later. Just do what they do. So the big line was, God is all there is. And I said, okay, this works. I get it. I'll start my prayer and then I'll move on. Well, the person that came before me said, the next person that says God is all there is, I'm getting up. Do you remember that? I could have passed out. I didn't hear anything he said after that, because that was going to be my opening line, and I didn't have anything else. I thought, oh God, what am I going to do? I don't have time to think. This is too new to me. So it's me right up after him. And I thought, you know what? If he's got a problem with that, that's his problem. This is all I got. God is all there is. To be honest with you, I never saw him after that. So I thought, you know, I really wanted to find him and say, listen, that's all I knew to say. But, you know, that's an aside note. But it helps it come together in a realistic way, in a comprehensible way, that God is all there is, including the leaves on the trees and the money. You know, which you would never think of in the same sentence or the same thought.
Well, in some faith traditions, no, you keep those things are all separate, because you're only gonna ask God for things that you consider to be sacred or holy or uplifting or worthwhile.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
leave the mundane stuff. I mean, how could you possibly pray for your plumbing to work properly and the toilet to flush as it should?
Money comes, but you know, you don't think of it that way. And so that was one of the takeaways that I appreciated in the very beginning of learning practical prayer, where it really brings God into everything and shows us how God is in everything, how you can see God in, you know, things that you don't even see God in before. It could go deeper than that, but it's a bit of a leap, I guess, if you're not used to thinking of God being a part of the economy and how it works. But when you think about it, and how it has worked historically, you know God is in this thing. But you just have to need a little help, maybe, you know?
Yeah. And by the way, when we're doing prayers for financial prosperity, we're not praying for there to be more money in the world. We're praying for there to be more money in our experience of the world. Mm-hmm. You know, the gross national product doesn't need to change in order for me to pay my mortgage. This is not a supply issue, it's a distribution issue.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that. Hey, listen, let's just be clear. I'm praying for more money in my, you say experience is so nice. In my pocket, okay? I need more money in my pocket.
And it's not even about having more money, because if you get, you know, twice as much money and 3 times the expenses, that's not a winning combination. So it is, as this prayer goes on to say, money to spend, share, and save. So that's plenty of money for whatever my requirements are, and not just enough to pay the mortgage when the first of the month comes along, but enough thereafter to share, to support other things that are going on in the world around me, and to save, because saving is good stewardship of our resources. Not saving for a rainy day, but saving for an opportunity.
And this is another side note, or what is like a number footnote. The footnote is that it's really a good teaching tool as well. Because when you say money to spend, to share, and to save, it's all in one phrase. It's all in one purpose, thought, you know, it's all one. And when you're a little short, you don't think about spend, share, and save, even futuristically necessarily. You just want to get out of the debt that you're currently in. But it's a complete way of thinking. So I won't get into the details, but it's a good, if you're doing financial management, financial planning, doing your own financial literacy, this is a point to think about. Spend, share, and it changes your perspective a bit. I won't go any deeper than that, but you start thinking, how much more do I really need? Or is this prayer perhaps going to help me reorder what I have to be able to spend, share, and save? And it's all in here.
There's a story in one of the prosperity classes that we teach about a preacher takes his son as he goes to visit another church where he's going to do the sermon. And as they're walking in, there's a box on the door for offerings. So the preacher takes $1 and puts it in the box and goes in and does the sermon for the people who are there. And the resident preacher thanks him very much, as we don't have much money, but we can give you whatever came in the offering. And they go and open up the box, and there's $1. And gives him the $1. And his son said, "Wow, Dad, if you put in more, you would have gotten more." And that's a surprise story right at the very end. It's like, this is not about lack. This is about being in that flow. Yeah, definitely could have happened.
You know what? I don't know how. I know that's a true story. That's a true story, I can tell you.
You've been there. Yeah.
I've been around a lot of corners.
To get back to the first step in the prayer, the first step in the practical prayer is recognition that there is that one infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that one love, that source. It's God, it's nature, it's spirit, it's the Big Bang, it's whatever everything is coming from, and we get to describe it and explain it and get the feel for it. The first step in a prayer is always about the infinite. It's always about that divine power and presence that is God itself. And we changed it a little bit based on what we're praying for. Because if I'm doing a prayer for money to spend, share, and save, I'm not going to talk about God as infinite love. And if I want a prayer about health, because maybe somebody's going into the hospital or there's something that's got concern or somebody's coughing, then you're not going to start by talking about how God is this infinite source of abundance and the economy. So we're going to change what we say in the first step of the prayer, in that recognition step of the prayer, to identify the aspect of God that we're referring to. Some people like to go through the book and just read the first step. They're broken out and labeled. There are little icons on each of them to just get yourself in the flow and the feeling of that infinite power and presence. Just read the first step without getting into the meat of the prayer, because that's all about the truth of God. And everything in the first step is true, because it's about the divine power and presence.
I love the whole thing, but especially the first part. That's the part that helped me to make the adjustment better, because each time, with each of the prayers, it gives a different perspective. We can say that God is multifaceted and a lot of dimensions and all of that. This helps us to see God in a bigger way. It just does. It just broadens the way, because you think, like I said, in the beginning of this, the first step, right smack in the middle, you start talking about, you said the economy is another of God's creations. And I remember stopping right there thinking, the economy, not money, but the economy is how it works, how it flows, what it means, all of that. That's a part of God's creation. And that made me stop and think, okay, maybe this is bigger than I thought. How do I feel? That's closer. And I think it's probably better to say closer to where I am and what I'm praying for than what I thought, closer to adjusting my beliefs or broadening my beliefs than I thought, because the economy is another of God's creations. What I'm thinking about is part of God's creation. I think I need to know about this. Now, everybody's not as picky as I am. I'm not, but I get accused of a lot of being too slow.
Everybody can be. If it's true, then it's true, regardless of how much you pick it apart. And if it's not true, then pretending it's true is really not helping anybody. It's me trying to understand how things flow together. And this was one of those times where this was the connection point for me. And it's probably in all the prayers, but this specifically, this was the connection. This is how it hit home to where I was and what I'm concerned about. Yeah, I know that God created the forest and the trees and all the beautiful animals and all of that. I get that. I feel good about that. But when you said the economy is another of God's creations, now you got my attention, because that's a little bit different. Yeah. Let's take a break. We will continue on to the second step in the prayer. See how much time we have for all of this today. And perhaps while we're listening to this lovely promotional announcement, you can think about whether or not you could see God in a landfill. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni. I'm loving this discussion. You know it.
Yeah, we're talking about the prayer from page 28 on Practical Prayer for Real Results, which is money to spend, share, and save. It's a prayer for financial prosperity. And in the entire first segment, we talked about the first step, and there are 7.
So during the break, I thought, I don't think you were supposed to spend that much time on the first part of it, but you know what? That's okay with me because making connections can take you a while. We're just pointing them out.
Yeah. So the first step in a practical prayer is recognition, where we're talking about the aspect of God that applies to whatever it is that we are inviting into our lives. In this case, it's all about the abundant nature of the universe and that there's no limitation in supply. And one of my favorite things to include in that is the awareness of the universe. The thought that God has created billions of galaxies with billions of stars and doesn't have enough resource to cover my mortgage is just so patently absurd that, if I can get myself into alignment with that infinite power and presence, there's not going to be an issue.
And that's an amazing, you don't understand, that's an amazing thought because you think of, I don't want to get into the different perspectives of God, but then there's that God out there that does things from out there. And you have the audacity to bring God close, not just closer, but like in the one, not just really close, but as a part of. So it's easy to think of God doing all those nice things out there. But what about this space over here, which isn't usually thought of as a God space? Yeah. You mean to tell me God is in that too? And this prayer to me effectively does that.
Right. As our children, the kids in our children's church sometimes say, there is no spot where God is not. So the second step in a practical prayer, he said, moving on, is the unification. So in the first step, we have recognized that divine power and presence. We're talking about God and God being the creator of everything and that God substance being everything that exists everywhere. The second step, in the unification step, we're going to say, if God is all there is, and I'm over here, then I am that too. So I'll read the second step. This is the unification. I am part of this creation, another example of God's love energy taking form. I'm surrounded by and immersed in the limitless abundance of God's good. The good that exists throughout creation is available and accessible to me in the same unquestionable way that there is oxygen available and accessible in my next breath.
And that's like a wow. That's a wow. Because in the very first line, the first clause, you said, I am a part of this creation. Another example of God's love energy taking form. You mean I'm that?
Yeah. And these two steps, by the way, are the difference between a practical prayer and what's come to be known as manifesting or affirmations. Because the step after this, the realization step, is an affirmation. But when we're doing an affirmation from this awareness, from this perspective, where we've turned our attention to the infinite, so we have identified that there is a divine power and presence that creates everything, that is creating what it is that we're seeking, and that we're part of it, that we are on that same team with the divine. The affirmation takes on much more power, because not me saying I have plenty of money, it's me saying God is infinitely abundant. I am part of that God presence. And together, God and I have all the money required. So I'm on the team. I might not be driving the bus, but I'm on the team.
I'm on the team. I'm there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
so, and I'll read. Yeah. I'll read the realization from this prayer. Knowing this, I know there is plenty of money available and accessible to me right now and always. I am in the flow of the economic system, sharing my gifts and accepting bountiful compensation. I have plenty of money for all my activities and endeavors.
So, that's encouraging.
Yeah, and that by itself is, a nice, powerful affirmation. That's a good manifesting step. But being in the middle of a practical prayer makes it much more potent, because it becomes a spiritual activity and a creative force in nature, just like the one that created all the planets. It's now using that same power to create this newness for me.
And it gets back to what you believe or what you know, because right in the beginning, you're saying knowing this, knowing all of that just came before, knowing this, I know that there's plenty of money available. So based on what we know from who God is and my position in the whole picture, it's kind of easy to know. It makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense.
It's a logical continuation of the of the first steps. We start with the infinite, then we identify that we're part of the infinite, and then we claim the part of the infinite that we want to be experiencing next.
Yes.
And then we can go to the concluding steps in the prayer, unless that little voice in the back of our head says, I don't think so. When I say I have plenty of money for all my activities and endeavors, and a little voice says, yeah, but the credit cards are maxed out. Or I say I have plenty of money for all my activities and endeavors, and it's, yeah, but the checking account is overdrawn. Yeah, but the mortgage is due. Yeah, but whatever. If we get that pushback in our minds, that is not the time to try and steamroller and pretend that it didn't happen. That little voice is telling us what we actually believe. Okay, I have now identified that there is an infinite power that creates everything, that shares itself as everything, including me, and I have access to that same power. And now I'm claiming the good that should fully well, by my logical thinking, be part of my experience. And if I get a voice that tells me I don't believe it, well, I don't believe it. I'm going to continue having the experience that I've been having of lack and insufficiency.
So the yeah, but says, hold on, there's a unbelief here that you need to examine. That's what you're saying? Yeah.
And if you can say the affirmation by itself and not get any pushback in your mind and completely believe it, it can work. But what happens is a lot of times the beliefs that we have are hidden. So they're buried deep down inside. My family never has money. Okay, well, doing that affirmation it's nice and it's pretty language, but it's not going to change anything, because if the belief is nobody in my family ever has money, then I need to get myself a bigger family and dispense with the thought that I have to continue living the way that I had been. Fortunately, if we get a yeah, but, we get two other steps that get added into the prayer before we get to the conclusion of it. And the first one is a refutation, where we identify that whatever that resistance that we have that's come up, we give voice to it. I'll continue. This is the refutation step. Any idea that there's not enough money is absurd. That's like saying that God could run out of star stuff and not be able to create another star. The notion that there's plenty everywhere except for me is simply not true. So I'm facing my disbelief head on. It's like, all right, some said I don't believe this, but let's talk about the truth again.
And I love that, because it's like you talked yourself, you beat your own argument. I can't actually prove my unbelief when I see what God is, the bigness of God, for, just using a generalized term, the bigness of God, and it's big. God is bigger than I thought. Then my argument doesn't hold. My doubt doesn't hold up, and I got to let it go.
Yep. The refutation, by the way, is the only step in a prayer which is negative, because we've used the first three steps to identify what we are choosing to have in our experience, and our belief is telling us that it's not possible. So we are refuting that. We are saying no to the disbelief that come up within us. God always says yes, but we have the ability to say no. If I have a belief that it's not going to happen, then what I'm doing is I'm addressing that belief head on and saying no to that incorrect belief. And then once I've done that, I want to get back onto the positive. So I'm going to repeat my affirmation. I'm going to reaffirm my good. This goes, I have plenty of money to spend, to share, and to save right now and always. I am a good steward of my resources and engage in activities that support my life of prosperity. right back into the experience that I want to be claiming.
It's going back and forth. When you have a belief and you discover a doubt or an unbelief or, something that is contrary, it's confronting yourself and your beliefs with the new facts that you found. And again, I'll say it doesn't hold up. I use the term challenge because, and some people may not experience the challenge because they don't have years and years of other stuff packed in to undo. But if you do, confronting that, this is amazing because you can't win. You can't win. You can't win against the enormous power and greatness and vastness of God. You just can't unless you don't bring it into focus. And you do that in the beginning. Yeah.
And it's not about winning against God. It's about aligning with that infinite creative nature of the universe and letting the desires that we're having be part of what's being created rather than duking it out with the infinite. That's not going to work.
So I'm going to throw this in here, and I know you probably don't like this kind of stuff, but, you're duking it out with yourself. You're duking it out with your own funky thinking that hasn't been successful and productive and profitable in the past. And you offer excuses. Well, maybe God doesn't want me to have this right now. When somebody gives you that, you stop talking because the argument over, right? But you present it in a different way. You present it in the way that this is who God is. This is what God is. And I'm a part of that. And this is what I am. So what God wants from me. So it is challenging your own beliefs that work against us from time to time. Well, a lot of the time. And I'm real clear and bold about saying that because if you're going to win, that implies that there's a battle, but there is. You do battle with yourself and your own thoughts. And that's okay. If you want to win, you got to change some things.
And winning is about being in that experience of harmony and uplift where the desires that we have and the experience that we have are in alignment. It's not winning is not defeating somebody else. Nobody has to lose in order for me to be a winner. So
correct. But the win is winning for me, against my other self or my negative self that's going to constantly tell me, no, you shouldn't. And these are all the reasons why.
Right.
So when I get a win, it doesn't go back. So
Henry Ford said, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're right. And a practical prayer is a way of identifying what we think and and being able to change that belief to get ourselves into alignment that the experience that we're having and the experience we want to be having are similar. So one final note on the refutation and reaffirmation. The abbreviation for a practical prayer is RUR2GR. And the 2 is those 2 steps. And if you need to go through the refutation reaffirmation process, you do. And if you get to the end of the affirmation, the notion that there's plenty everywhere except for me is simply not true. And the reaffirmation is I have plenty of money to spend, to share, and save right now and always. I'm a good steward of my resources and engage in activities that support my life of prosperity. And if you get another but, you do another refutation reaffirmation. You go through that loop again. And if you get another but, you go through it again. And you keep going through it until your subconscious is not kicking back against it. Your belief system is not saying, this is not true, I don't accept this. So either it'll clear out and you won't get the pushback in the comfort and privacy of your own mind, or you'll realize this is bigger than I thought it was going to be, and go back and readjust the prayer accordingly. Like, to my financial state is much less dire than it used to be. It's getting better. Instead of plenty of money to spend, to share, and to save is I have enough. Somehow all the pieces fit together and I have enough, and see if you get pushback on that. The other thing you can do is you can talk to a practitioner, somebody who is trained in doing prayer for other people, because there's one creative power that creates everything. And we've been talking about how we use that power. But the fact of the matter is that infinite creative power can be harnessed and used and directed by anybody. And the advantage of me doing a prayer for you is I don't have your belief system. I don't disbelieve. I can read this prayer for you and I know it's true. And I could spend some time together with you and find out where the pushback is for you, and then create a prayer that fits into what's believable for you. We'll talk about the last two steps in the practical prayer, the gratitude and release, right after a break.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione.
We've been having a wonderful conversation diving into the details in one of the prayers in Practical Prayer for Real Results. And there's so much richness in the conversation that we have about this because, as you've mentioned, I just do these. I remember writing these. It was a while ago. And there's a bunch of tweaking and wordsmithing that happens when it's turned into a book. And you're looking at them with very fresh eyes and a lot less of the mechanical part than I went through the first dozen times.
But we're looking at it from, different perspectives.
Right.
I came into as somebody who didn't, this is the first time I ever saw anything like this. In 2020. And there's I guess in every religion or denomination or whatever, there's a formula for prayer. I mean, there's tons of formulas out there. But this one was different because it really made me examine what I believe. If what I believe is key, then this prayer right up front, this formula right up front made me deal with that. And I'm good with that. I'm good with it. But you go fast again because you know this, which is cool. One day I'm going to be as knowledgeable, hopefully, as you, and I'll be able to whip right through it. But right now I'm walking through it, saying, what does this mean? And how does this? Okay, I get it. And there's a lot of aha moments in this.
And that's wonderful.
Prayer formula.
That's wonderful. And for anybody who's listening who has been thinking about getting into a prayer practice and and considering the how this might work for them, do it. It's a practice, and the transformation that happens when you go from not doing practical prayers to doing practical prayers is astounding. So there's a real rush in being a newbie in practical prayer. When you first learn how to do this and you start doing prayers and stuff starts changing in your life, it's like, whoa, this is so cool. That's like getting in the car and doing 0 to 60. From 60 to 80 is, a nice improvement as well, but it doesn't feel nearly as exhilarating as that first starting piece.
And let me just throw this in. It doesn't take a long time to get the results. No. Once you know what might be holding the results back, and you deal with it however you deal with it. But when I first started, I'm just trying to get the steps and reorganizing the formula that I knew. And oh my God, it was a chore. But once I understood what the principle and the understanding of it was, let me just fast forward to this week. There was an issue for me, and I'm driving, and I said, hey, listen, I know what the outcome I want, what it should be. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. And I'm driving along just having it, and I pulled over. A lot of times I will put something to music or whatever to myself. I'll make a song out of it, but I was intense about this. And there was no refutation. If it was, it didn't matter. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I don't even care if this is a reason why I shouldn't. This guy has to work. And when I got home and sat down at my computer, I'm telling you, it was magic. What I thought or what I needed just popped up there, and I just sat there, and I had to just be so grateful. I thought, I'm not sure if I did the gratitude part, but I'm doing it now. I can't believe this. And it was quick. It was quick because I expected it to happen. And if you asked me if I expected it that quick, I think if you pushed me on it, I probably would have said, I can't see any reason why this should take a week or two. I mean, this is no big deal. Right. The information is out there. I am asking for it now. And where's that fall in? The affirmation part? Whatever.
Yeah, that's your affirmation or your realization step. I had one that happened last week. It's April, out walking the dog, and it was one of those mornings where it was cloudy and, there was going to be a chance of showers, but it had already rained, and I figured the showers had gone by, and so I didn't have my raincoat, didn't have the dog's raincoat. We're off on the walk as far from the house as we ever get, and it starts to drizzle, and it's like, oh, that's annoying. And then we start walking home, and it starts raining more. And then it's like quite a downpour. And I realized I know how to do prayer. So I did a prayer, and the prayer was for me and for the dog and for the rain and for the neighborhood to all have exactly the perfect experience of the rain. And it is not necessary, as far as I'm concerned, for me and the dog to be rained on. So I would be perfectly okay for the rain going elsewhere for a little while we go home. Almost immediately it stopped raining. Mm-hmm. We got home, it started raining again, and it was pouring. There was quite a deluge, and it was about as hard as it had been raining before. And that was completely inside my belief system, because I know that April showers are really unpredictable. So there was no stretch there. I knew that was possible. I knew it was possible for the rain to just stop for a little while. And everything, the Mayflowers are still getting taken care of. They're on their plan. I'm not interfering with the order of the universe, but just allowing my experience to be a little bit more harmonious.
And you said something really important there. You said that it's not interfering with the order of the universe. And I thought just that kind of idea, I'm thinking this thing that I need to work correctly is not going to interfere with anybody else, hurt them in any way. It won't rain on anybody else. I just need this. And I think it's maybe worth taking a minute to make sure that it's okay. It's not going to hurt anybody. And bingo.
Yeah. And it's not even that I need this, because I could have walked home in the rain. I mean, when I left the house without a rain jacket, I put myself in the possibility that I was going to walk home in the rain. Mm-hmm. So I'd prefer not to. I accept the possibility of not doing that. But there's a lot of nuance. We'll get into that in future episodes. Let's wrap up with a prayer. This has been a long episode. We've gone into a lot of stuff here. And the prayer that we're going to end with today is the prayer from the book. It's from the section on prayers for financial prosperity. This is the entire prayer, money to spend, share, and save. And it is 7 steps. And the last 2 are gratitude and release, which are the final steps in the prayer. So I'm not going to label them. If you want to see what they are, get yourself a copy of the book. It's on page 28. This is an abundant universe. There are billions of stars and billions of galaxies. One glance at the night sky is ample proof that this is an infinitely abundant universe. A forest has billions of leaves on thousands of trees, all living and growing in a connected ecosystem. The economy is another of God's creations, with money as the currency that flows in exchange and balance. All of these uncountable riches are part of one divine creative expression, a dazzling work of art on God's canvas. I am part of this creation, another example of God's love energy taking form. I am surrounded by and immersed in the limitless abundance of God's good. The good that exists throughout creation is available and accessible to me in the same unquestionable way that there is oxygen available and accessible in my next breath. Knowing this, I know that there is plenty of money available and accessible to me right now and always. I am in the flow of the economic system, sharing my gifts and accepting bountiful compensation. I have plenty of money for all my activities and endeavors. Any idea that there's not enough money is absurd. That's like saying that God could run out of star stuff and not be able to create another star. The notion that there's plenty everywhere except for me is simply not true. I have plenty of money to spend, to share, and to save, right now and always. I am a good steward of my resources and engage in activities that support my life of prosperity. I'm grateful for the good in my life, for the cash in my pocket and the balance in my bank accounts. I give thanks for the resources at hand that allow me to share my gifts and participate fully and joyously in life. Knowing that I am a full participant in God's infinitely abundant universe, I set this word in motion, releasing it to the law and knowing that the universe responds with a resounding yes. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.